Guys, I promised I would do some instructional type videos this winter, and I quickly put together a simulated lake, and I thought I'd talk about where I set up, why I set up where I do, some of the reasoning behind that. They say that 90% of the fish are caught by 10% of the fishermen. And that's 100% true. But really, it has to do with not the fishermen. Most 90% of the time, I say it's your spot, your fishing spot. And you guys have probably noticed that a lot of times you'll be fishing with somebody and one guy just might absolutely be killing them. And he's getting a lot of fish out of the same hole. And I'm going to kind of go over that and why that is. First of all, when you think about a lake, especially ice fishing, a lot of people make the mistake of just going out, drilling a hole, and just throwing the line down. And that's fine. You'll catch a few fish. Once in a while, you'll get a good one. You might get lucky. But in all reality, that's just not the good way to do it. Whenever you hit the lake, especially ice fishing, and probably bass fishing too, maybe not trolling, but what you're really targeting is, and what I call it is the most craziest thing you can find in the lake. And that's what you want to fish. You want to fish those unique areas. You want to fish those areas that stand out. You want to go absolutely attack the most unique place you can find on that pond. And what I did is I highlighted some of them on this little pond that I drew. And I'm just going to go through them really quick. And hopefully this will get you thinking about where you fish and how you might be able to attack the place you fish a little bit better and absolutely catch more fish. So let's just start at the top of the lake. This line here is the shoreline. It's just a small pond here. And what I have up here at the top of the lake is boulders. Now these aren't just rocks. These aren't like little rocks you see on the shoreline. These are boulders. These are like giant boulders that might be the size of a car or half the size of a car. A lot of the lakes that I fish have those. Maine has a lot of lakes like that, or ponds that have that. Now what's cool about that, what I've learned over the years, is when you see those boulders on shore, they're a good indicator that some of that stuff is also carried out into the lake. That's where you're going to find your rock piles, or your isolated rock piles, or your bigger rock piles, your underwater islands. A lot of those are going to be off shorelines that give away where they might be. That's a good way to try to find them, is to seek out those things on the shoreline. Now, most of the rock piles I find or that I fish, I don't just find them by finding boulders on shoreline. I do a lot of riding around in the summertime. And it's just like hunting. You need to do some scouting if you want to be successful. And I ride around. I have a depth finder on my boat. I'm not necessarily looking for fish. I'm looking for changes in water depth. Where it spikes up. I'm looking for places with hard bottom. I'm looking for irregularities in the bottom. And right here is rock piles that I kind of roughly drew here. And this is an awkward shaped rock pile. And these are areas that you really want to target and fish in the wintertime, especially for things like brown trout, bass. Any of your game fish will relate to rocks, because rocks hold crayfish, rocks hold bait fish, Rocks hold other smaller fish that the fish are going to feed on. And it's also security for them, places that they can hide, places that they can feel secure. They can lay up and rest without being pestered by other fish or predators. So I marked some X's on here where I might put a hole and set up. Now, when you're fishing a rock pile, you're not just fishing that rock pile in general. You're looking for irregularities on that rock pile to make it even better fishing on that rock pile. Here, there's a point coming off this rock pile. And you can see I like to set up right on the point. Out from that point, more than likely that's going to taper out into deeper water. The deeper side of rock piles is very good. Fish that are coming open water feeding, like white perch, will often come in and feed on the edge of a rock pile, go back out, come back in. I do quite well on the deep sides of rock piles, especially if it tapers out into deep water. I like to run some traps out a little ways, not too far. And then another spot that's really great on a rock pile is an inside turn. If you can imagine bait fish swimming along here, they're going to stop and congregate on this corner, inside corner. Any bait fish coming or any smaller fish are going to stop and congregate. That's a perfect prey spot. Brown trout like to prey. They like to sit in these areas waiting for prey to come by, especially the bigger ones. The little ones tend to cruise around, but the bigger ones, they like to sit and wait for their prey to come. Usually when you find one rock pile, you're going to find other rock piles, and they might be smaller. They might be multiple ones, and it's always good to fish amongst them. Runs that go in between rock piles are very good for brown trout. For whatever reason, they like to cruise. It's either cruising between the rock piles or cruising this way. I've caught a lot of nice browns in between rock piles, the little dip areas. And here again, off the deeper side of the rock pile. And anytime you find a combination of rocks and weeds, like here's a weed bed and here's a rock pile, right in between these weed beds and rock piles, or if there's a combination of the two, highly effective area to be fishing. Rocks are always twice as good if you have weeds also present. You can see over here, I don't know if the camera can still see it, but here's a tree in the water that's fallen in the tree, and I've got a trap set up right off the end of this tree where it's sticking out into a little bit deeper water. Not real deep water, it's probably 4 or 5 feet deep underneath it, but stuff like that's great for catching brook trout. In fact, I've even had luck catching brook trout underneath docks that have been left in the water. That's worked for me up on actually Moosehead Lake. So fish will use structure in the wintertime as well, not just the summertime. Here's a main lake point. Main lake points are one of your best places to fish. I like to find, you can see this one goes out underneath the waterways. You can't see it, but if you drill and you sound and you really check the depth, I like to find where the end of that is and fish. It's a great place to fish. And along the sides of it here, you can see. One of the best places in a lake, especially lakes that like I fish, like Androscoggin Lake, Cobbessy, there's spring holes. There's a spring hole that's out and kind of in the middle of nowhere. But I happened to find it one year. Just got lucky. And what I do is I'll remember these spots. I'll save them on GPS. I always carry a handheld GPS in the boat, and I use the same one in the wintertime. And you can go right back to these spots. They're accurate within about 5 feet. So I'll set up year and year again right on these spring holes, and that one trap will produce fish like you cannot imagine. White perch, brown trout. Highly effective areas. They're hard to find. It takes a lot of years to find them, and we typically found this a couple years in a row because the ice didn't form as well in that area. Not as thick, not to the point where it was unsafe, but when the ice was thin, you could actually see the spot where it didn't freeze as well. Here we have an island. Islands are excellent places to fish, and then again, you're looking for the most unique places on that island. Here we got a point coming off the end of the island. A very good place to intercept a fish. I'm not just going to put my trap anywhere. I'm going to put my traps in the most unique places I can find. Here I have isolated boulders. Those are probably a good place to fish on, and I mark those on my GPS when I'm out in the boat. I'll put a trap right beside them, within a couple feet. Let that bait swim right around the rock. I catch a lot of brown trout doing that. When brown trout are in, especially later in the winter, they're cruising looking for stuff to eat. Perfect place to intercept one. You also catch a lot of nice bass doing that. And brook trout. Here's another point. Those are perfect places to intercept. You only get 5 traps. Put them in the best places you see. Very best places. Here we have an inlet. Inlets are always great for trout especially. There's always feed getting washed down, and there's always feeding active fish in an inlet. You just have to be careful. The ice can be unsafe, can be thin obviously, and can be open water as well. So use caution, but they're an excellent place to intercept, especially early in the year and late in the year. Here we have what we call a shelf, what I call a shelf. A lot of lakes that we have around here are pretty shallow along the shoreline, and you got to go out, and you keep drilling in a line until you find the drop off. Here it goes from 5 pretty quickly down to 20, and I would fish right along the shelf. Fish love edges, just like wildlife, like deer that like to that go along edges. Fish are the same way. Fish edges. Fish will travel along them. They'll find places that they can hide, and there's bait fish. They love those edges. Don't put your traps in random. Find the edges. Find every 5 of your traps should be a specific reason why you put that trap there. You're not just putting it out there and just saying, "Oh, let's see what happens. Good luck." Over here, I have what we call a basin. These are highly effective in shallow lakes, especially if you're fishing for pike, black crappie, largemouth bass. If you have a shallow flat, here's a 10-foot flat. Well, it happens to have a 15-foot hole in the middle of it. It's not that big. It might only be 50 yards across it, but guaranteed there's going to be a big pike there. There's going to be a big bass there, probably a school of black crappie, maybe a school of white perch. Those are the areas you want to find. Find a nice big giant flat that has a little basin in it or a little hole, and you're going to catch something. It might be a shallow basin that has a deep run coming into it. You want to fish in that run. You want to fish the edges of that run. That's where your fish are going to be. That's where your bait fish are going to come in. Your schooling fish like white perch are going to come in school, and you're going to be there ready to intercept them if you're there. Isolated weed beds. Here's one in 10 feet of water. There's one that I commonly fish. There's 2 or 3 different ones that I commonly fish on Androscoggin Lake, where if you're out there on the boat in 10 feet of water, the weeds come up to the surface and lay on top of the surface. You can actually see them. I mark them on my GPS. I go back and ice fish around them. These isolated weed beds, in my opinion, are pretty close to a rock pile for being the best places in a lake to fish, especially your warm water varieties. But believe it or not, I do catch a lot of brown trout around these weed humps as well. Brown trout will come and feed in the weeds. Brook trout, believe it or not, the stock brook trout that we go for, I like to fish a lot of boggy areas, weedy areas in a lake. Actually, that's where they go and they feed on stuff. That's where there's a lot more stuff to eat there. So up here we have a narrow gut between a bigger part and a little part. That's a great place to intercept fish. So the most important thing I want to say, and I want to really, really drive home, is the fact that you want to be looking for the most unique places on a lake to fish. And all 5 of your traps should be in one of those unique areas. So if I'm fishing by an island, I probably have one trap off a point. I got one trap by a boulder. Another trap is around a weed bed. Another trap might be along a drop off. You never, ever just throw a trap in there at random. Try these ideas. Really think about it. Look at your maps. Ride around in the boat. Come up with a list of places that say, hey man, that looks like a place that I want to try ice fishing. Write it down, either mark it on a GPS, line it up with a tree on shore, however you want to do it. But go back and fish that exact spot. And I will guarantee that you will see some pretty good results. And I hope that helped out today, guys. And I'll be back again at some point for another fishing tip.